going to be making this really cute 3D unicorn stuffy style. And this is the 5x7. It is a 7 hooping stuffy, so it does take a bit more time than a simpler stuffy, but it does come fully 3D. So it has the face and horn on both sides, and we've got the yarn hair. You can add the names to them, and you have the really cute detail in the face. So we'll get started on making this cutie. Okay, so for materials today, you're going to need a fabric for your horn. I'm using a performance stretch knit. It gives that sparkle without having the stiffness of a vinyl. Just make sure you try testing stretching before purchasing these, because sometimes they aren't the best quality and they distort. You're going to need fabric for the back of your ears, as well as an accent fabric for the inside of your ear, and I match the belly to that as well, and some small pieces of another accent color for your hooves. And you're going to need some minky for your leg hoopings. There's 2 of them, so I have 2 pieces cut. Water soluble if you're working with some fluffy fabrics like I am. I am using just some acrylic yarn. I'm going to mix a few colors for the mane and the tail. And then your biggest thing that's different about this stuffy is you're going to need a larger panel of fabric for your body. So your body is made not in just one single hooping, but you're going to make one half of the body and then the other half of the body. So there are instructions on the size to cut those for each size hooping in the tutorial, so make sure you have a peek at the tutorial and make sure you have the right size fabrics. Mine are probably extra wide, but I just cut a strip. And you're going to need just all your obvious things like your stabilizer and your hoop and your scissors and all your threads. Loaded hoop 1 onto my machine. It is the horn and the ears that we're going to complete in this hoop. Step 1 is stitch directly onto your stabilizer. Step 1 stitches out the placement box for the horn as well as the ear placement. We're going to go ahead and put our ear fabrics, 2 of them down, our inside and our outside, with right sides together, and tack those down with step 2. So we have our fabrics right sides together laid over our ear placement, and we're going to go ahead and stitch step 2. We've tacked down our ears with right sides together, and step 3, we're going to lay our horn fabric over this placement box so it covers it, and it's going to do the detail stitching on the horn for both sides. We've gone ahead and stitched the detail steps. You can see a center fold line as well as the details that are going to be for both sides of the horn. Now before the next step, sounds scarier than it is, you're just going to take this bottom half here and you're going to gently rip those stitches off of the stabilizer. Right till you get to that fold line. And you're just going to fold on the fold line, matching up those 2 sides, and then it's going to stitch a final outline around that for our last step. finished up the final outline on the horn, and we can move on to the next hoop. The final step is just a stop star, so your machine won't recenter and potentially catch up on any of your fabrics that you have there. I've gone ahead and loaded hoop 2 into my machine, which is going to be your front and back leg for one side of your stuffy. And I have my Minky. You can use fleece. If you really want to, you can use cottons or non-stretchy fabrics, but Minkies and fleece are going to be more forgiving. And I'm going to stitch step 1 directly onto my fabric. Step 1 tack down done to secure our fabric to our stabilizer, and then we're going to go ahead and stitch step 2, which will be the placement for the hoof applique. We're just going to lay our fabric right side up over and tack down each of those. Those have been stitched out to secure that applique fabric to the stabilizer, and we're just going to trim where you don't see a zigzag. This zigzag here is going to be on the outer perimeter, so you don't have to worry about fraying there. So we're just going to trim as closely as we can to those lines. My favorite scissors to use are my double angled. I'll link them in the comments. And for Minky, if you pull it up at a 90-degree angle to cut, you'll get all those pile fibers, and it just makes a nice cleaner cut. So I have those trimmed, and we're just going to go ahead and run step 5, which is going to be the satin stitch to cover up those raw edges there. I'm going to add water-soluble stabilizer over top of this to get a nice clean finish on that Minky cut. Got our satin stitch on, and you can go ahead and rip off the stabilizer. Water soluble on top, sorry, not the backing. And then we have step 6, which is going to be a placement line here over the top, just to show you where you're going to lay down your leg when you add it to the body. I did mine in a contrasting fabric already, so it's not, or thread color already, so it's not a huge issue. But if you did this in a matching color, you definitely want to use a contrasting color for this step so you can see it well. Those extra dark lines there, that will show you where to lay that down. So that line there is going to go right over your placement when you're adding your legs. So we've got our last step, which we are going to lay our fabric backing right sides together over top of the hoop and do the final outline. The final outline stitched out, I chose the open version, which has a small opening that you can stuff your legs with after you have finished your stuffy. It adds less bulk when you're adding your limbs and then your backing to your stuffy, so it's my preference. But it does require a little bit more hand sewing at the end to close those small holes. We've gone ahead and loaded hoop 3, which is just your legs again, and it is just the mirror image, so the legs for the other side. So you're just going to repeat all of the steps from hoop 2, except for it's going to be a mirror image. So we've gone ahead and finished up our hoop 3, which is just the mirror image of hoop 2, and created our second set of legs for the other side of the stuffy. Hoop 4, which is going to be the head of one side. The big thing on this is to make sure you have your large piece of fabric, because you're going to use a total of 2 hoopings to create each side of the stuffy, and you want a larger uncut piece of fabric so you don't have a seam in it. The head starts up here, and so you want to make sure that your fabric starts in this corner and you have excess below the head and behind the head, so we can complete the bottom half of the unicorn. So I'm going to stitch step 1 directly onto my fabric. We pack down our fabric to the stabilizer using step 1. As mentioned before, here is your head. You want some excess fabric underneath and behind to finish the rest of the body in our following hooping. You can refer to the tutorial to make sure you have the right size for your hoop size. We're going to go ahead and stitch all of the detail steps, which will finish out our eyes and our mouth and our cheeks, and then we'll come back and show you how to attach the ear. I've got some water-soluble stabilizer over the face just because I'm dealing with a Minky with a pile. It's also highly suggested that you float an extra piece of stabilizer under these large eyes. All I do is just lift up my hoop and slide that under, and that'll just give the eyes the support they need, as they are large and have a lot of stitching in them. I've gone ahead and stitched step 2, which is the white of the eye, step 3, which is going to be your more main color of eye, and this eye has a beautiful highlight shade as well, which is step 4. You can get creative with these. I did a teal color and then I highlighted it with pink to match the hooves. The next step is going to be our optional eyelashes. So the eyelashes typically always have an option that is separate, so you can skip this step if you want to not have eyelashes on your unicorn, but I'm going to stitch them on mine. Through all the details up until step 13 to go through and complete our face. Step 14 is going to be 2 markers that you're going to use in your next hoop to line up this head hoop with the rest of your body. So you want to make sure you use a contrasting thread so you can really see those markers. It will help you attach to the next phase. So while all those details have been stitching, I've been preparing what we had stitched in hoops 1 through 3. Hoop 1, we had our horn, so I just turned that right side out. The ears in hoop 1, I turned right side out, and I also folded down about 2/3 of the way and stitched those. You can stitch them on the machine or on your hand sewing if that's easier. We have both mirror images of our front leg and back leg for each side. I've also prepared some yarn. You can use ribbon too, but yarn's my favorite. I've just taken a length of yarn in multiple colors and just wound it back and forth and then just tied it at the top. And this is my favorite hack for yarn hair that you need a lot of. I just take a cardboard piece and cover it in tape and then cut a couple slits up at the top, and then I just wrap my multiple colors. I always make it a lot longer than I think I need and more than I need, because you can always cut it, you can't add more to it. So this I'm going to end up sewing. I'll just slide it off of this and sewing. You can also use tape along the top here, just a nice big piece of tape here and on the back side, and squish together and then slide it off if you don't have a sewing machine. So we have those placements there and there, as well as a placement to add our ear. I am going to have the ear that's folded on the top. You want to make sure those are mirror images on that fold, because your other one's going to be on your other side. You're going to lay it over the placement line and tack it down, and then we're just going to trim it like an applique. We have that ear tacked down, and I'm just going to take my applique scissors and trim as close to that tack down line and get rid of all the extra here. We have that ear trimmed as close as I could. I'm going to run the satin stitch over that to hide that raw edge. I'm going to have some water-soluble stabilizer over top, which will help not get caught in the ear, as well as give you a nice clean finish on that satin stitch. So that's hoop 4 completed. The last step is just a stop star that you don't stitch, so it doesn't recenter and get caught on your ear or anything. So we're going to unhoop. Do not trim any of this. You can remove the stabilizer excess if you want to, and we're going to rehoop, and then I'll show you how to add this hoop to our next hoop. So we've loaded up hoop 5, which is the back end of this side of the unicorn, and we stitch step 1 directly onto the stabilizer. What that is just your 2 placement markers, and they are going to match up with the 2 placement markers that we stitched on our hoop 4. So you're going to lay this right side up so that the marker from hoop 4 on our fabric matches the marker on the stabilizer. So I tend to use a pin to sort of mark one side and go in on the other side, and then I mark the fabric and go in on the stabilizer, and that sort of gives me my anchor spots. To where my fabric is supposed to be. So then you can take your fabric and pin it on outside the stitching area where those should be. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch our step 2. Now our step 2 should stitch, sorry, I'm going to take that pin out. You don't want any pins anywhere near where you're actually stitching. So we're going to stitch step 2, and that should stitch directly over the marks of the placement from hoop 4. And if it doesn't, it means that your markers aren't lined up properly, and you're going to want to repeat that. So you can go ahead and stitch step 2. Okay, so you can see the step 2 right here and right here, and they're right over the placement from the previous hoop. So that's your double check lines. You can also double check your markers, which I did. I just reran step 1 right on top of the fabric, so that way I knew that they were right on top of each other, but you don't have to do that. So you can go ahead and stitch step 3, which is just going to secure the fabric to the stabilizer now that we know that it is lined up properly. Okay, so I went ahead and stitched step 3, which went around to tack the body down to the stabilizer, and then step 4 is the placement for the belly applique. I'm going to lay my belly fabric right side up over the placement and tack that down. So I tacked down that belly fabric, and I'm just going to trim as close as I can here on the straight stitch and leave a wider margin around the zigzag. Trimmed, and we're just going to run the satin stitch, which is step 6. We've completed the satin stitch, and our next steps are going to be our placement to add our legs. We have our placements for our front and our back legs, so front and back, and we're going to tack those down. You are going to line up that stitch line that we did on our leg hooping with the placement and try to tack down right on top of both of those lines. If you don't get it exactly, it's not make or break. You just need to get it as close as you can. Tack down those legs, and we're just going to trim the excess as close as we can, and then I'm going to put water soluble stabilizer over top of it, and I am going to stitch the satin stitch on top. We've completed the satin stitch on the legs with our water soluble on top, and that's all that we have to do for that hoop, so we can go ahead and unhoop and rehoop for hoop 6. Hoop 6, and this is just going to be the other side of the unicorn, so we're starting with a head again for the other side. So all the steps are going to be the same, except for it's going to be mirror image. So we want to have our nice big piece of fabric as indicated in the tutorial, and then we are going to have it in the opposite corner as the last time. So we want our fabric to start up in this back corner because the head is going to be facing the other way, so we want excess fabric on the back side of the head and underneath the head as well. And we're just going to go through and do all the steps that we did in hoop 4, and just go through and do it in the mirror image. We've gone ahead and stitched hoop 6 all the way up to step 16, and that's where things start to get a little different. So in our placement, whereas the other hoop we just had the placement for the ear, this also gives us a placement for the mane and the horn. So I attached the ear just like I did in the hoop 4, and now we're going to do the mane. So we want to make sure that we push this ear out of the way and either tack it down or tape it in place or pin it in place to keep it out of the way so it doesn't get stuck in that mane tack down. So the mane is divided into little sections for ease of curving around the head. I am using my yarn that I just sewed a straight line, or you can tape, and it's going to be placed with the longer part on the inside of the stuffy and tack down here. For yarn, you absolutely must use water soluble stabilizer on top. Otherwise your foot's going to get caught in those yarn pieces and it is not going to be pretty. So make sure to have some water soluble over there, and you can slow down your machine on this step and really babysit it to make sure that you're catching all the yarn for the mane. I've tacked down my yarn there. I have quite a bit of extra that I'm just going to trim away the rest of that, and then we can proceed with the horn. So I've trimmed away the bulk of the yarn. I'm going to lay my horn underneath the yarn, and then I'm going to put the rest of the yarn on top of there and tack it down together. And that might maybe a mistake, but we'll see how it goes. Experimenting. We get our hair. I tend to go overboard with yarn, so. And our horn. Not sure if I'm gonna want that hair there or not, but we can always trim it away after. And we're on to the final step, which is step 21. And you are going to take your backing from you making in hoop 4 and 5, and you are going to lay it down, and you're going to match up all the parts that you can. So where the mouth comes and the nose and the outline, the ear, we want to make sure it's tucked under and tucking in all that hair. And we're going to run the final outline around just the head portion. Again, I'm going to pin in place any places that I can outside of the stitching area. Got that all pinned in place. It's going to stitch here around, so I've pinned just the jaw line there because I know it's not in the stitch path, and then just outside the stitching area here and here. It starts over on this side, so I'm going to sort of move the hair of the bulk over this way, and then once it stitches there, I'll probably push it back in. So lots of stopping and starting will make your life a little easier. So we've got our outline done there. Obviously, the more yarn you add, the more bulk it's going to be, and it does make that a little bit harder. I probably went overboard as per usual. And we're going to go ahead now and unhoop, and we're going to finish the bottom half, and then we will flip that back to finish out our stuffy in hoop 7. So we've loaded hoop 7, which is our last hoop, and we're almost there. And we stitch step 1 on our stabilizer, which again is your placements just like on hoop number 5. So we've got our panel here that we added our completed backing on, and if you flip it up, you can see you have the markers from hoop 6 that we're going to again lay over top of our hoop and match the markers from hoop 6 to the markers that are on the stabilizer. And you can rerun step 1 again if you want to tack down right on top, and then run step 2, which should go right on top of your placement from hoop 6. So we've stitched step 2, and you can see that those are right on top of our placement from our previous hoop 6. And we're going to go ahead and stitch down step 3, and it's just going to proceed like step 5, where we tack down, and then we're going to do our applique on our belly and add our legs. As I'm laying down my applique, I'm taking care to match it to the other side. So at the front chest of the unicorn on the other side, I have just the orange sort of going into the pink. That way the stripes will match on either side. You don't have to do that, but I just like it to match. So that's a tip to make sure that you're lining up if you have some sort of pattern that you want to match. So for my stuffy, I'm going to add a name to the side of the unicorn. So you can add that either in software or right on your machine if you prefer. I like the software so I can get it exactly where I want it. So I'm just going to go ahead and stitch that step. We've got our name added, and we're just going to proceed with the placements and tack downs for our legs. Our legs tack down and satin stitch over, and the other difference on this hoop now is we have the tail placement. So step 11 is going to be the placement and 12 will tack down. Again, I'm using yarn, so I'm going to use water soluble over top of it to make sure my foot doesn't get caught in that yarn, and your long side is going in towards your stuffy. We've got the tail tacked down, and we just have our last final outline step. And for this step, we are going to flip this backing back over. We want to make sure we have our tail and all of our limbs all tucked in so they're not in the stitching line. And again, it's going to start on this side, so I'm probably going to push all my limbs over to that side to give myself less bulk here, stitch that, and then start pushing them the other way. We stitch the first section down to here, and then it's going to leave a turning hole. I've gone ahead and pinned those places by pulling it pretty taut, and you can deal with some of your bulk by pulling it out through that opening hole. Just make sure it is not in the way of that final outline. And we've got that all lined up. You can now take it out of your hoop and trim away all the excess and turn it around and get it stuffed. We hope this tutorial really helped you, and we would love to see all of your beautiful unicorn photos shared in our fan group on Facebook.